Several times a week, I get to drive by the elementary school that I attended in Auburn, where I live. I love driving by because every time I see that building, I have lots of memories that I love about being a part of that school. Now, as an adult, I get to volunteer there. I do Popcorn Fridays once a month when school is in session. So one of my favorite things to do is to be back on campus and to see the same classrooms that I went to and the same murals painted on the wall that were there when I was in school. Just a great chance for me to reconnect with a place I came from. So why do I tell you that? Because today we're going to talk about this idea of mercy. And I experienced mercy when I was on campus at my elementary school. But let me introduce myself. My name is Weston. I'm one of the pastors here at Faith, and I'm super excited to spend a few minutes with you today talking about the person of Noah and how God promised us mercy. Now, when I went to that elementary school, I was one of those guys that was really nice. Like, I had lots of friends. There was nobody I ever had enemies with. But one of the things that I knew is true about me is it's really important that life is fair, especially when I was a kid. Like when I did the right thing, that somebody would recognize me for the right thing. Or when somebody else did the wrong thing, that they would be disciplined or corrected or maybe even punished for doing the wrong thing. Of course, I never wanted to be punished for doing the wrong thing. I always hoped that I would get off when that happened. But it didn't always work that way. But here's what I know about fairness. Fairness is that sense in us that when I do the right thing, I'm recognized, and when I do the wrong thing, that I'm corrected. Now, mercy is an interesting word, and we're going to talk about it today, this idea that God promises us mercy. So why is that important? Well, because mercy is this. It's about not receiving the punishment that we deserve. That's kind of contrary to fairness, right? I just kind of talked about what fairness is, but mercy is this idea that I should have received a punishment for the wrong thing I did, but I didn't receive that punishment. I had that happen when I was in the 6th grade. I was a part of a classroom of 6th graders with Mr. Price as my teacher, and there was a moment in time where there was a note being passed from desk to desk, and people were writing in the note, and the note came to my desk, and I opened it, and there were all these things that were written about this kid in my class named Jim. And they were really hurtful things and harmful things. And I got discovered with the note on my desk. And that got me sent to the principal's office. And then after that, a follow-up conversation with Mr. Price. And I could have been in really big trouble, but I wasn't. In fact, what happened was I got corrected, but it was just with words. I didn't get suspended. I didn't get detention. I didn't have to give up lunch or recess. But I did get a good talking to. And even though there was some correction in that, well, I really received mercy on that day because it could have been much worse. And this idea of mercy, right, that we don't receive what we deserve. Well, today I want to tell you a story from the Old Testament, from the book of Genesis, that you've probably heard before. And if you haven't, I'm glad that you're here today to hear it now because it's a great story. But it's about a man named Noah and an experience where he got to see firsthand God give this promise that he would be merciful to us. So it goes like this. In Genesis chapter 6, there's a story, and it really starts before that. So let's maybe you can give it a backstory. In Genesis chapter 1 through 11, and we talked about this last week if you were with us, God creates everything, the heavens and the earth and the light and the dark and the animals and mankind. And then there's disobedience. Mankind is disobedient to God, and God gives them a consequence by putting them outside of the garden, and life becomes more difficult. And things from there kind of spiral out of control. Cain and Abel have a little tat together, and one brother kills the other, and then it goes on from there. And by the time we get to Genesis chapter 6 in the story, there's been a lot of years go by, and then there's been this evil that has crept in as people are being selfish and acting badly towards one another all the time. And it says in Genesis chapter 6 that it grieved God's heart, that it pained him in his heart that mankind would live this way towards one another. And God determines that he's going to need to take action to correct this poor behavior. But what's beautiful about this story that we're about to read is that there was one man that God saw had a favorable heart. There was a man that God saw that had a right heart, that he wanted to do the right thing. And God says, he's the man I'm going to use to essentially start over. So in the book of Genesis in chapter 6 through 9, God tells a story of how he brings a flood on the earth. And so he takes Noah and he speaks to Noah and he tells Noah, I want you to build an ark. It's a really big boat. I want you to build this ark. And he gives him all the dimensions and tells him how to do it. And Noah sets to work. He listens to God and says, God's making a promise that he's going to do something through me and I'm going to be obedient. I'm just going to do it. That's what the Bible says, is that he's going to do it. And so he does. He sets out to build it. I can imagine the people in Noah's day were thinking, who is this? Like, there's no water nearby. There's not some big ocean like they would live in Washington like we do, where it'd be obvious that somebody would build a boat. No, Noah's in the middle of nowhere, and he's building a boat. And I can imagine people are looking at him like, what is this all about? But he's faithful, and day after day, he continues to do the thing that God's asked him to do. And eventually, the boat is built, and God's like, here's what's going to happen. I want you to put on the ark all of these different animals. And he brings the animals to Noah, and they open the doors, and they march on, and Noah puts them away in all the different places that he created within the ark. And then God seals the door shut. And God brings rain. It says that in that day, God brought rain, and it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. I can't imagine. Like, I live in Washington. I grew up in Washington. I love the rain, but I cannot even imagine what that kind of rain might be like. And because of God's mercy, I won't ever have to experience that. Because in this story, Noah does experience it. And I can imagine that as he looks out the window and he's bobbing in that boat on the waters as they continue to rise, they rise above the land that you and I see every day. And they rise above the trees, and then above the hills, and then above the mountains, and pretty much the whole earth. All the land of the earth is covered in water. If I were in Noah's shoes, I probably would have some concern about how this is unfolding. Knowing that so many people's lives were going to be wiped out. That's a hard thing to grasp. But here's what I know. Is that God made a promise that he was going to do something to help mankind. And so Noah believes that promise and continues to be obedient and to do the thing that God asked him to do. And so this flood comes, and it does wipe out all the living creatures, including mankind, perish. And then after the rain stops, of course, the earth is flooded, so now what? And Noah looks out, and he sees that there's water over all of the earth, and he waits patiently. And then eventually he sends out a bird, and the bird flies, and it comes back, and he's aware that because it didn't land anywhere, there must not be any dry ground yet. And he waits 7 days, and then he sends the bird out again, and the bird comes back, and it has a leaf from an olive tree, and he's like, the waters are receding. And then he waits a little bit longer, and he sends the bird out, and it doesn't come back, which means it must have landed somewhere, and it found a place to light itself. And so Noah at that point begins to unfold a process of opening up the ark and beginning to live again. And what we read in the Old Testament scripture is this. In Genesis chapter 8, God makes a promise. We call it a covenant. It's where God makes a promise that he's not going to break. And it goes like this. Then God said to Noah, "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number upon it." So Noah came out together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives, and all the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground and all the birds. Everything that moves on the earth came out of the ark, one kind after another. And then Noah worshiped God. And the Lord saw that Noah worshiped him, and he made this promise. He said, "Never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though every inclination of his heart is evil from childhood. I never again will destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease." This is great. God is demonstrating through this life that Noah lived and the promises that Noah believed in and chose to obey God. God's now making this ultimate promise to not only Noah and his family, but to everybody who would come after Noah. It says in Genesis chapter 9, just the very next chapter, "Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, I now establish my covenant." This is a promise. "With you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, all the wild animals, all that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth." Well, isn't that great? We live in Washington. It rains a lot, and as much as it might rain longer than we want it to, we know from this promise God will have mercy on us, and he'll never let it rain like it did before. "And this is the sign of the covenant I'm making between you and me and every living creature with you." He says this, "I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. And never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life." Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. Well, I like this. God promised us mercy. And that's what he's demonstrating with this sign of the rainbow. I love this passage because it's not just about you and I seeing the rainbow, and it's fun to see a rainbow. When we see it, we can remember that God's given us this promise that he's going to demonstrate mercy to us. But you know what I love about this passage is it says that when the rainbow comes out and God sees it, he also remembers that he's made a promise to us. That the sign of the rainbow isn't just about me seeing it or you seeing it, it's also about the fact that God sees it. Now, God demonstrates mercy to us. And I think that because he demonstrates mercy to us, one of the things he hopes for and plans for is that we will also demonstrate mercy to others. In the same way that God promised us mercy, I think we have an opportunity to demonstrate mercy to other people. I want to encourage you this week as you think about and talk about maybe with your family the idea of God promising us mercy, that you'll also think about who in your world do you need to demonstrate mercy to not give them what they deserve, but to demonstrate that God is at work in your life and that you can be just like him and you can follow through with mercy just like he follows through with mercy for you and I. Well, thanks for joining us this morning. So much fun to be with you, and I look forward to seeing you again online.